I never thought a $12 garden gnome from Home Depot would lead to a full-blown suburban showdown. But here we are. The gnome, painted cheerful, holding a little fishing rod, stood proudly in my front yard. My kids loved it. My wife loved it. Even the mailman gave it a nod of approval. But apparently, it was a capital offense in the eyes of our local HOA president, Karen. The first letter showed up like a bill from the IRS. Dear resident, your lawn decor violates Section 14, subsection B of the Community Beautification Code. Please remove the unauthorized ornament within 48 hours, or you will incur a $75 fine. I stared at it and laughed. I don't even live in the HOA's jurisdiction. My house is literally across the street from the development they govern. But apparently, the HOA had expanded its borders in a way that looked a lot like a hostile takeover. When I ignored the first letter, Karen herself showed up at my doorstep, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, gave my gnome the stink eye, and declared, "Sir, we will not tolerate tacky lawn ornaments in this community." I replied calmly, "Ma'am, this isn't your community. It's mine. That little guy stays." Her jaw dropped like I'd just confessed to arson. She scribbled furiously on her clipboard and hissed, "We'll see about that." I had no idea how serious she was, or how ridiculous this would get. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one wasn't as polite. It read, "Final warning. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines of $150 and potential legal action." Legal action? For a gnome? I chuckled, dropped it into a folder labeled HOA Clowns, and carried on with my day. But things escalated fast. Within a week, 3 neighbors I barely knew were suddenly concerned citizens, knocking on my door to tell me how my decorative choices were lowering their property values. One man, clutching a Starbucks cup like it was evidence, muttered, "Karen says if she lets you keep that thing, people will start putting up flamingos and wind chimes." I blinked. Oh no, not wind chimes. Civilization as we know it would collapse. They didn't laugh. They actually looked horrified. Then came the fake violation tickets. Yes, actual printed slips slapped onto my mailbox. Notice of violation. Failure to comply with HOA standards. Fine $200. That's when I realized these people weren't just annoying. They were playing pretend cops. So I started documenting everything. Photos of the letters. Scans of the fake tickets. I even recorded Karen lecturing me in front of my house while pointing at the gnome like it was radioactive. I wasn't mad yet. I was entertained. This was HOA cosplay, and I was their unwilling audience. But something told me Karen wasn't going to stop with letters and gossip. And oh boy was I right. Saturday morning, I stepped outside to water the lawn, and what did I see? A whole squad. 4 HOA officers, all in matching polo shirts embroidered with community enforcement. Clipboards in hand. They looked like the world's saddest SWAT team. Karen stood at the front, sunglasses reflecting my gnome like it was a crime scene. "Sir," she barked, "we're here to conduct a compliance inspection of your property." I laughed so hard I almost dropped the hose. "You mean trespassing?" She stiffened. "Failure to comply will be considered obstruction." Obstruction of what? Their cosplay committee meeting? One of the polo shirt warriors squinted at my driveway. "Sir, this vehicle is not registered with the HOA." I stepped closer, smirking. "Yeah, because I'm not in your HOA." Karen waved her clipboard dramatically. "The community map was redrawn last year. Your property is under our jurisdiction." That's when I pulled out my ace, a copy of my deed. I kept it in my office, but I sprinted inside, grabbed it, and slapped it down on the hood of my truck. "Read it," I said. "Not in your HOA." Karen didn't even glance. She scribbled furiously instead, muttering about escalation procedures. The neighbors peeked through blinds like it was live TV. I swear I heard someone munching popcorn. The gnome sat proudly beside me, grinning like he knew this was just the opening act. 3 days later, I came home to flashing lights. At first, I panicked. Actual police? No. Worse. It was the HOA's community patrol. Imagine 2 middle-aged men in khaki shorts with magnetic security decals slapped onto their SUVs. They even had amber flashing lights on top. One strutted up to me with a cheap badge clipped to his belt. "Sir, we received a report of unauthorized lawn ornaments and unregistered vehicles." I held up my phone. "You realize impersonating law enforcement is a crime, right?" The guy stuttered. "We were not impersonating, we're, community peacekeepers." Karen emerged from her SUV, smirking like she had brought backup from the FBI. "They have full authority to enforce HOA compliance." I deadpanned. "On HOA property. Not mine." That's when one of the so-called patrolmen reached for his belt, where to my shock he actually carried a pistol. Not a taser. Not a BB gun. An actual firearm. He rested his hand on it and said, "Sir, we need to inspect your vehicle for compliance." My stomach dropped. This was no longer a comedy. I raised my hands slightly, calm but firm. "You're not searching my car. Step off my driveway. Now." The neighborhood was dead silent. Even the birds shut up. Karen's smirk faltered. She hadn't expected pushback. What she didn't know. My next-door neighbor is an actual sheriff's deputy. And he was watching the whole thing. Just as HOA cop's hand twitched on his pistol, my neighbor Greg, the actual sheriff's deputy, walked out of his garage in full uniform, holding a gym bag. Perfect timing. "Everything okay here?" he asked casually, but his tone had steel. Karen lit up. "Oh, officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is violating HOA codes, refusing inspection, and becoming aggressive." Greg raised an eyebrow. "This man? You mean the homeowner standing on his own property, minding his business?" She sputtered. But he has a gnome." Greg stared at her, then at me, then at the security patrol with their pistols. "Are you out of your damn minds? You can't enforce HOA rules off HOA property. And you sure as hell can't draw a weapon on a homeowner." The wannabe cop stammered. We were just." Greg cut him off. "Put your gun away before I put you in cuffs for brandishing." Karen tried to recover. "This community has standards." Greg laughed. "Lady, this house isn't in your community. I swear if looks could kill, I'd be 6 feet under." Karen's face turned beet red. The crowd of nosy neighbors? Oh, they were loving it. Phones were out. Cameras rolling. This was better than Netflix. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. And I knew. This battle was far from over. The very next day, I got a certified letter. Not from the HOA, but from Karen herself, on official-looking stationery she clearly made on Microsoft Word. It read, "Due to your hostile behavior toward community officers, the board has voted to impose an emergency fine of $500. Further noncompliance may result in property liens." I nearly spit out my coffee. Property liens? Against someone not even in their HOA? I called my lawyer buddy, showed him the letter, and he laughed so hard I thought he'd choke. "Frame it. That's fraud in writing." So I did. Hung it right above the gnome like modern art. But I didn't stop there. I filed a formal complaint with the county, submitted all the fake tickets, letters, and my deed showing I wasn't part of their jurisdiction. I CC'd the state attorney general's office too, just for fun. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. More fines. More fake officers loitering near my property. She even circulated a newsletter claiming I was a dangerous neighbor undermining community harmony. The best part? She spelled harmony wrong. Twice. My kids started calling her Dictator Karen. My wife started making popcorn for our nightly mail opening. It was like reality TV, but in our mailbox. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building a case. And when it all blew up, I wanted every receipt at first. Most of the neighborhood bought into Karen's narrative. They whispered about me at block parties, avoided eye contact, and muttered things like troublemaker under their breath. But then cracks started showing. Mr. Jenkins down the street, who'd been fined $50 for having his trash can out an hour too long, confessed that Karen once threatened to revoke his community privileges unless he trimmed his bushes symmetrically. Mrs. Alvarez, fined for a bird feeder, joined in. She said I was attracting wildlife. I live in North Carolina, Karen. There's wildlife. One by one, the horror stories spilled out. A retired veteran fined for flying the American flag. A single mom harassed over the shade of beige of her siding. Suddenly, my gnome wasn't the problem. Karen was. People started dropping anonymous notes in my mailbox. "We support you. Thank you for standing up to her." Someone even left cookies with a sticky note that read, "Down with the Queen." It was hilarious, but also telling. Karen wasn't running an HOA. She was running a suburban dictatorship. And I had just become the reluctant leader of the rebellion. I didn't ask for this role. But by God, I was going to play it well. If Karen wanted a war of rules, fine. I had time. I downloaded the entire HOA bylaws, 47 pages of nonsense about uniformity, aesthetic integrity, and community vibrancy. Half of it read like it was written by someone drunk on white wine. But here's the kicker. Buried in Section 8, subsection F, was a rule that all board members must maintain their own properties, in full compliance with community standards. Guess whose house was 5 inches out of compliance? Karen's. Her mailbox was the wrong model. Her backyard fence was 2 feet taller than the bylaws allowed. And, sweet irony, her own decorative fountain wasn't on the approved list. I photographed everything. Time-stamped it. Labeled it in a folder called Karen's Hypocrisy.pdf. This wasn't just petty revenge. This was ammunition. Meanwhile, Karen kept sending me fake fines. Each one I scanned, filed, and prepared to use as evidence. It felt like playing chess with someone who thought they were winning while I was quietly lining up checkmate. And soon, I'd get the perfect opportunity to drop it all in her lap, in front of the entire community. The HOA's monthly board meeting was approaching, and this one was going to be juicy. Rumors spread fast. Karen had put me on the agenda under disciplinary action. Oh, I was ready. I showed up 15 minutes early, binder in hand. Every fake letter, every violation ticket, every photo of her own violations neatly organized. I even printed copies for the board members. The room was packed. Neighbors filled every chair, lining the walls, standing in the back. It felt like a courtroom drama. Karen strutted to the front like she was queen of suburbia. Her sunglasses perched on top of her head, clipboard ready. She opened with a speech. "This homeowner has repeatedly violated community harmony, refused lawful inspections, and endangered the safety of our officers." The crowd murmured. Some nodded, others frowned. Then she gestured to me. "You may defend yourself, but I warn you, the evidence against you is overwhelming." I smirked. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing about you." And with that, I opened the binder. I started with the letters. Passed them around. Highlighted where she threatened property liens illegally. Next, the fake tickets. "Notice the logo here," I said. "Looks official, right? Except this HOA has no jurisdiction over my property. That's called fraud." Then came the piece de resistance. The photos of her own violations. Her illegal mailbox. Her unapproved fountain. Her too tall fence. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen turned beet red. "That's irrelevant. I am the president." I leaned forward. "Exactly. And your own bylaws say board members must follow the same rules as everyone else. So if my gnome is a violation, your mailbox is too." The crowd erupted. People who had been quietly suffering under her tyranny finally found their voices. "Yeah. What about my flag fine? You charged me for Christmas lights." Karen banged her clipboard like a gavel. "Order. Order." But it was too late. The room had turned against her. The board members huddled, whispering frantically. Finally, one cleared his throat. We need to address the allegations against President Karen." Karen shrieked. "Allegations? Lies. Slander." I calmly slid a copy of Karen's Hypocrisy.pdf to each board member. They flipped through it, their faces falling deeper with every page. One woman, clearly fed up, muttered, "She fined me for a garden hose." Another said, "This is enough. We need to vote." Karen pounded the table. "You can't vote me out. I am the HOA." But democracy, even in HOA land, still existed. The board voted. 4-1. Karen was removed as president effective immediately. The crowd cheered like it was a sports game. People actually clapped. Someone shouted, "Long live the gnome." I sat back, hands folded, watching Karen storm out of the room like a toddler denied candy. Justice served. The days after Karen's removal were surreal. The HOA office, once a place of dread, suddenly turned cooperative. The new president, Mr. Jenkins, the guy fined for his trash can, called me personally. We're reviewing all fines issued in the last 2 years. Looks like Karen overstepped. A lot. Neighbors stopped by to thank me. Mrs. Alvarez brought tamales. The veteran brought beer. Even the single mom came over with brownies. My porch turned into a bakery. Meanwhile, Karen sulked in her house, blinds drawn. Rumor was she tried to appeal the vote, but got laughed out of the county clerk's office. My gnome? Still standing. Still fishing. I even added a second one, just to be petty. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt normal. Kids played in the cul-de-sac. People waved at each other again. No one feared clipboards. It was like Karen's shadow had lifted. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no. I had one last card to play. Remember that letter where Karen threatened property liens? Yeah. My lawyer friend loved that one. We drafted a formal complaint. Harassment, fraud, and impersonation of law enforcement. We attached every piece of evidence. Sent it to the county prosecutor and the state attorney general. 3 weeks later, Karen got a knock on her door. Not from fake cops. From real ones. She wasn't arrested, but she was served with official notices, cease and desist orders, investigations into misuse of HOA funds, and a very real warning about impersonating law enforcement. Word spread fast. The woman who once terrorized the neighborhood with fines and threats was now under legal scrutiny. Neighbors cheered. Some even threw a block party to celebrate her downfall. The gnome wore a party hat. And me? I just sat on my porch, sipping sweet tea, watching karma do its thing. Under new leadership, the HOA changed fast. Fines were reduced. Stupid rules like no wind chimes and no lawn chairs were scrapped. People repainted mailboxes however they wanted. A few even got pink flamingos just to spite Karen. It was glorious. Board meetings became civil discussions instead of Karen's dictatorship. Neighbors felt free again. The sense of community actually returned. Greg, my sheriff neighbor, joked. All it took was a plastic gnome and a lunatic with a clipboard to bring us together. I laughed. Funny how that works. The HOA still exists, sure, but it's no longer a weapon. It's just what it should be. And Karen? She eventually moved. Word is her new neighborhood has no HOA. Poetic, really. Months later, I got one last laugh. A realtor friend showed me Karen's old Zillow listing. The photos? Blurred out her illegal fountain, but you could still see it in the background. The description read, "Charming home in a quiet, harmonious community with strong HOA leadership." I nearly choked on my coffee. Strong leadership? Lady, you were a suburban dictator taken down by a $12 gnome. I printed the listing, framed it, and hung it right next to the framed fine letter. My wall of trophies. Sometimes I'd sit in the living room, glance at the frames and chuckle. All this, because Karen couldn't mind her own business. So what's the takeaway? Simple. Never underestimate the power of documentation. A calm attitude, and yes, a garden gnome. Karen thought she could bully me into submission with fake fines, wannabe cops, and outright lies. Instead, she exposed herself as a hypocrite and got ousted by the very people she ruled over. And me? I didn't just win. The whole neighborhood won. The gnome still stands, proudly holding his fishing rod. A little symbol of resistance. Sometimes I catch neighbors smiling at him as they walk by. Kids wave. Adults chuckle. The HOA tried to start a war. But in the end, all it took to beat them was truth, patience, and a bit of petty humor. And whenever I look at that gnome, I remember. One plastic fisherman. One suburban dictator. And one very big mistake.